baby.
Turn it on.
It's the light bulb died because I had the thing on for so long. Hi. You're allowed to talk, by the way. If I have my glasses on, is the glare still too bad? Is it better if I look this way?
Yeah.
Okay. Now he wants out. This is crazy. Hi. You're here in the nursery with me and Joe, and Icky just left because he can't hang. The baby is napping right now in his bassinet, and I figured I would use this brief window of time to get to the nitty-gritty of the birth story, because a lot of you were upset about the Icky's back. Icky's decided to stay. Hi, buddy. A lot of you were upset about the video I posted last week not being enough of the birth story. I was like, you guys, this is just part 1. We're gonna get to part 2. You can just chill your bill. So Joe's here to help me stay on track with what the story is. And like, where should I start? I guess where we left off was we were admitted to labor and delivery. I'm gonna rewind a little bit, actually.
Yeah, like you were super horny last December.
Oh my god. They already know how horny I was last December. That's the first video of this whole pregnancy saga. So we had our final check-in. Sorry, I'm wearing just a sweater and a bra, so I feel like it's just Tits McGee over here. We had our last checkup with the OBGYN before our induction date, which was the 15th. We did not make it to the induction date. At the checkup, they take your blood pressure every time just to make sure it's not high or whatever. So she takes my blood pressure and it's high. And immediately after she takes my blood pressure again and it's super normal. But because it was high, just that one time, they sent me over to labor and delivery to get monitored. At labor and delivery, they put a monitor on my heart, I believe. They took my blood pressure again and they put a monitor on my stomach to check in on the baby to make sure everything was good with him. So my blood pressure never went high again. Everything with my vital signs was super normal, super chill. But when they put the monitor on my stomach and we could hear the baby's heartbeat, they noticed that there were periods of decelerations in his heart rate. Is that right?
And arrhythmia.
And an arrhythmia, which is just like irregular rhythm. Which to me just says he beats to his own drum, walks to the beat of his own drum. Is there a saying there? Marches. He marches to the beat of his own drum. Because his heart was decelerating though, the midwife came in and she suggested that because we were past my due date, which I'm still unclear on when they think my due date was, because technically I think the due date...
They gave us 4 of them.
They gave us 4 due dates, and this was literally 2 days before one of the due dates they had given us, so we weren't really over time, but like whatever. Tell me my son's heart's decelerating, tell me there's an arrhythmia. I'm gonna be down with whatever emergency precautions you think we need to take. They said, let's induce you, let's get this baby out. I said, okay. So we called the doula comes. My dad and I had an appointment to go get my nails done because it had been so long since I got my labor nails done that they were grown out as fuck. So my dad and I were supposed to like get my real labor nails done. We had to cancel that appointment, so just went with the OG labor nails, hella grown out, super embarrassing. They admit us to labor and delivery, and they give me a pill that I don't remember the name of, but it sounds like miso soup.
They're all hard to pronounce.
So they gave me a pill that's supposed to induce labor, and you can have one like every 6 hours, up to 24 hours. They gave me 2 pills. And within those first 12 hours, we had an episode where the baby's heart decelerated for a longer period of time than the medical team felt was safe. So what started happening at that point was an emergency response, I guess. Like people would flood into the room and change my body position up a bunch to try and find the baby's heartbeat again so that they could figure out what was going on with him, or if maybe in a different position his heart rate would go back up. And every time they did that, the heart rate did go back up. However, they decided to stop the miso whatever pill because they were concerned that maybe that was causing the decelerations to happen. And then they suggested we try something else, which was basically like putting a shoestring inside my vagina to help induce labor, but that way the medicine's just on the string. And if the medicine is what's causing the baby's heart to decelerate or to cause any undue stress on the baby, they can just pull it out and the medicine completely stops working at that point so that it can't affect the baby anymore. It's also at this point that a midwife comes in the room And she says, all right, let's talk about your options. We've had 2 emergency scenarios at that point where they run in, they put oxygen on my face, and they basically just wiggle me around. So then the midwife comes in when we're not in an emergency situation. She says, okay, so now that everything's calm, let's talk about how this could go. She's like, I know that it's your plan to have an unmedicated natural birth. That being said, your body is not dilating, and we're dealing with this heart situation, which may or may not be something. They kept saying the word ominous. They're like, it's not ominous, but it's not normal and it's not good. And she also just kept saying, like, I've seen this happen before where babies have an arrhythmia during labor, but they come out and everything's fine with their heart. And she says, here's the flow of things that are going to happen. So we go to the shoestring. Then she says, if the shoestring doesn't work and we have to pull it out, the next step is we're going to put a balloon inside your cervix, and we're going to manually dilate you with the balloon, which basically just means they inflate a balloon in the hopes of opening up my cervix so that the baby can come out naturally. And then she said, if that doesn't work, then we're going to give you Pitocin, and we're going to hope that the Pitocin creates contractions that make your cervix dilate more so that you can have a natural delivery. But they said, we're going to exhaust all of these things, and then if they don't work, we will do a C-section if there's a situation that calls for it. And at this point, I was thinking about like pain versus suffering, and it's like I can get through a lot of pain, but I don't think I've shared on my channel before, but my family has a history of heart problems with children and babies that doesn't end well. And so during my entire pregnancy, we had extra checkups where they would do like an additional anatomy scan to look at the baby's heart to ensure that everything was developing well because of my family's history of heart problems in infants. So when his heart started decelerating, and with the arrhythmia and all this conversation around the heart being weird, like it started taking every ounce of my focus to not have 100% of my anxiety like just surfacing around this problem that I had been trying really hard not to manifest my entire pregnancy, let alone during the birth process. And I felt very strongly that with all of that energy being spent on my part, avoiding the anxiety of talking about a baby not doing well with a heart, I couldn't focus any of my energy on opening up my body, and my body just wasn't opening. Like it wasn't time. I wasn't naturally in labor. I was induced. The induction wasn't working, and it's because my body wasn't ready to go into labor. Or it's because my baby heard me complaining about my nothing job for 9 months and was like, bitch, you can't even do a vlog without bitching about it. You can't go through labor. We're gonna have a C-section. Oh, sorry. I just started, when I start feeding him the baby's here, obviously. The elephant in the room is the baby. He started crying from his nap. We're trying to lightly implement the schedule that Ryland's given us that's been very helpful. It doesn't matter. This is so boring. But anyways, the baby's here. You can see him, and one of my boobs hurts when he sucks on the other boob, but whatever. Moving on. So I have all this anxiety. I can tell that my body is not going to go into labor. I sit down with the midwife, and by sit down I mean I'm laying in a hospital bed because they also won't let me out of the hospital bed, and everything about my like pregnancy birth class training was like, you don't want to be immobile. And it's like, at this point I've been immobile for 12 hours. They won't let me out of the bed because I'm on this monitor. I can't move. Like every fiber of my being is saying my body is not going to go into labor. I don't want to prolong my suffering. I would like to have a scheduled C-section. I say this to the midwife, and she says, okay, I'm going to go talk to your doctor. So then the midwife comes back with the doctor, and the doctor's like, you're going to have a vaginal delivery. We're going to do all these things, and it's going to work. You're young, you're athletic, you're going to push this baby out. We don't need to do a C-section on you, and you're making this choice based out of fear, and trust me, I know what we're doing here. Even though my choice wasn't based out of fear, it was based off of the understanding that my body's not dilating because I'm not ready to go into labor. I'm insanely anxious because of my family history of heart problems in infants, and it's taking all of my focus and energy to banish that anxiety And if I'm doing that, then my body's not producing oxytocin, and there's not a chance in hell that these contractions are ever going to be progressive. But at that point, I felt like I didn't really have a choice outside of that, and I had to do what the doctor was saying. So we start trying everything else. And that starts with her putting a balloon in my cervix to manually dilate it, which was incredibly painful. And while they're trying to do it, she gets that thing inside me to open me up to put the balloon in. And she says the lighting's not good enough, so then she needs to send one of the nurses down to get what are those things called? It doesn't matter. The thing that's inside me that's opening me up, she knows that she can find one in the hospital that has a light on the end of it so that she can definitely see the cervix, to put the balloon into it, to open it, blah, blah, blah. But for some reason at this point, the nurses start fighting against her with everything that she asks for and saying, like, we don't have that. And she's like, I know we have it.
By the way, they all use their iPhone lights, which is like unprofessional and shitty.
Oh, they were using their iPhone lights in my hoo-ha? Damn. So I'm spread eagle on a table with iPhone lights in my snatch, and they're trying to get this balloon inside me, which they had told me would take a matter of seconds, and then it turned into 30 minutes of the doctor fighting with the nurses trying to get this balloon in.
Sending someone looking all over the hospital for this certain type of thing.
Yeah, and that was very uncomfortable, but whatever. They finally get the balloon in, and I do start dilating, but only to the degree of which the balloon can blow up and nothing past it. And then the balloon just falls out, and
You never got past 2 centimeters.
I never got past 2 centimeters. No, nothing ever shortened. I was never effaced. I was never in a different station. Like, I was just having non-productive contractions because all the medicine they're giving me just produces contractions but doesn't produce the opening of the cervix. So then they say, if we can give you the epidural, we're like, I feel like the epidural was like we're one step closer to getting a C-section, because if they do have to do an emergency C-section, they're going to need a tap to my spine to like numb me from the waist down to do that business. So I get talked into the epidural, and this is after I think there was one more emergency scenario where they established that the balloon wasn't working past the 2 centimeters and I wasn't dilating anymore. So they suggested the epidural and Pitocin. So after they give me the Pitocin, things start going bad for the baby again. His heart decelerates again. A whole team rushes into the room, and they need to counteract the Pitocin because my contractions are so strong that they're causing the baby to crush what they think is his umbilical cord, which is still what they think is causing him to have these D cells in his heart rate. So they give me a shot of adrenaline in my thigh, or something like adrenaline, right? So my heart's now beating out of my chest, and I'm itchy from the epidural, and super, like, I can still feel the contractions, like with my hands on my stomach. I can feel my stomach hardening, and I can feel these contractions with my hand. And in that moment, they just start screaming, like, we're gonna break your water, which is something that I also wanted to avoid. Do we have your consent to break your water? And it's like, in that moment, yeah, I mean, it's terrifying. There's 12 people just rush into the room. You're all screaming at me. So I let them break my water. And then they start pumping water back into me because they don't want the baby to be crushed with no barrier of water between him and my womb, which is contracting really heavily still. Which is confusing to me that they would want to break the water, but I guess breaking the water speeds up labor sometimes. And in this scenario, it did not. So I'm still not dilating. They leave the room again. I try to relax again. They even brought in an ultrasound to like find the baby's heart, and they were like, we can see his heart. It looks okay. You're going to have a vaginal birth. And I'm still just like, okay. So then the last thing the doctor says to me is, start getting in your mindset that you're going to push this baby out. You can push for me, right, Elizabeth? Like, you're going to push. And I'm like, yeah, I can push. We're going to push. We don't have another choice. We're going to push. So Joe and my doula take a nap because my support team needs to be strong to help me through whatever the about to happen. And I put on a hypnobirthing tape, getting myself in the mindset to push. Oh, and they give me Pitocin again. And I start getting in the mindset to push. And then 45 minutes later, the room is swarmed. There's a new doctor because the last doctor's shift ended. and the new doctor's screaming, we're going to do an emergency C-section. Do you consent to that? And I'm just like...
Slam some paperwork in your face.
Yeah, they put some paperwork in my face, and I'm like, yep. Then really quickly, they're out with the razor.
They give you another shot of adrenaline in your thigh without asking you.
That's right. They give me another shot of adrenaline in my thigh. So, like, at this point, my whole body's shaking. They're like, sign this waiver for your C-section. They're shaving my pubic hair so that they can do the incision on it. The doctor's talking about how we don't have enough time to do anything, but she doesn't code the situation an emergency for the rest of the hospital. I don't know why she didn't code it an emergency, because they were treating it as an emergency situation, but there wasn't the communication of that to the rest of the team. So she keeps saying, like, I have 10 minutes to get this baby out before something really bad happens or whatever. So they throw me on this gurney, and then they start rushing me to the OR immediately. And when we get to the OR, the nurses are fighting with her again because she didn't code the surgery as an emergency. And so there's a bunch of repercussions that come with not coding it as emergency. And one of which is they cannot open the medicine drawer to give me the necessary antibiotics that you need to give a person before you cut them the open in an operating room and rip a baby out of them while they're still awake. And I'm still awake through all of this, by the way. I'm awake through all of this. I'm violently shaking. I'm sick to my stomach because I haven't had, for 9 months, I haven't had Tylenol. For like 10 years, I haven't had like a hard substance in my body. I'm like through the roof with adrenaline shots, epidural, Pitocin, everything that they've given me. I'm starting to feel really sick. And I'm literally like shaking like a fish out of water. Like, it's like I'm convulsing. I'm not just like trembling. My arms are flopping up and down on the table, and the table itself is very small. It's like a crucifix, basically. It's one thin bed that you lay down on. They have a tarp up so that you can't see. And I remember looking into it, and I'd seen some women say, be careful, don't look up, because sometimes the lights above the bed are reflective and you can see what they're doing. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm not going to let this be part of my birth story memory. My eyes are closed. I'm saying the serenity prayer in my head. I'm doing everything within my power to disassociate from the situation because it's awful at this point. There's just a straight bar across where they expect me to have my arms outstretched on either side of me during the procedure. There are restraints on those arm things, but they did not tie my arms down, and they asked me to hold my arms out even though they're flopping up and down like this for the entire procedure. The doctor's screaming at the nurses, please release the antibiotics. I need to give this woman antibiotics. I have to open her up in 4 minutes. I have to open her up in 3 minutes. Like, there's literally a countdown clock of how bad the situation's going to be if they don't get me open in a certain amount of time. The nurse is saying, you should have coded this an emergency, as if that's more important than getting me the antibiotics that I need so that I can have the surgery safely and not get an infection. And they're literally fighting as if they're like in high school. Like, it's like the cattiest, weirdest fight to have in front of a person who's flopping around like a fish having an emergency C-section in the middle of the night. And Joe's not in the room yet. They won't let the doula in the room. Joe, you were scrubbing in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what did that mean?
They just had me wear all that protective stuff, but it included like booties.
Got
and
it.
a thing for my beard and
Got it.
all this stuff. I was only away from you for less than 10 minutes.
Okay. But in those 10 minutes, like, they only gave me 10 minutes before they were going to cut me open, and they were counting that down. So the anesthesiologist is using the epidural tap to put more in me. The doctor's done arguing with the nurse. The nurse is not going to release the medication. She can't unlock the drawer or something that has the medication that the doctor has to give me. And the doctor doesn't have the time to figure out another solution. So the doctor just cuts me open without giving me the antibiotics. And immediately they're into this C-section. And then you came in, right? Mm-hmm. Were you there pre or post cut?
I think I was there for the cut.
So Joe comes in, and I just remember saying to you, please plug my ears. Because I didn't want to hear what they were saying anymore. Because that's like one of the most up things that was keeping me like in the room, is just like the argument that these two were having, where I'm just like trying with every fiber of my being to just hold my body still, even though it's shaking like crazy.
Yeah, I was definitely there when they cut you open.
And so Joe starts plugging my ears, and she says, I'm cutting. They cut me open, and then they just start, I don't even know
yanking you around.
Yanking me around, but I think that's normal.
Yeah, they couldn't get him out of the uterus.
Well, then after, how long were they yanking me around before she said, get ready to meet your baby?
Like an hour, it felt like. I'm pretty sure.
They were having a hard time getting the baby out because the contractions in my womb were so strong that his head was trapped. So she says, get ready to meet your baby. And from everything I've seen online and all the stories I've heard, when you hear get ready to meet your baby, it's like a matter of seconds before the baby's pulled out and you're shown the baby. There was 10 to 15 minutes between her statement of get ready to meet your baby and there he is. So like that was another wave of anxiety of like, whoa, where the is he? And after the fact, she explained that that was because my contractions were so strong, and all of her years as a doctor, she's never felt a womb so hard or whatever, that she was struggling to pull his head out. So then they pull the baby out. I do remember seeing you see him, and that was a beautiful moment for me, Joe. And you kind of like cried a little bit, and I really liked that moment. And then they pulled him over to the little table where they like take care of him and whatever. And then that's where they let you do a fake umbilical cord cutting. Yeah. They just posed it as if Joe was...
Hey, you want to cut the slack?
Yeah. And you did. So you did. Yeah. And I looked over and he just has this huge head of hair. I just see this baby with this hair and I thought, that's crazy. My baby has hair. Because I was positive we were going to have a bald ass baby forever. Because I didn't have any hair.
And then don't forget they lacerated your intestines.
Oh, and then apparently the doctor lacerated my bowels, which means she cut them on accident while she was performing the procedure. And because she cut my bowels, that meant I had to be left open on the table after they got the baby out until the head of surgery at the entire hospital could come up to the OR to see the damage the laceration had caused to my bowels so that he could assess how bad the situation was and so that he himself could stitch up the damage, because I guess that's hospital protocol. So then I'm just left on the table, still shaking violently. The baby's out. They will not close me up. And I start vomiting on the table, just waiting for the surgeon to come for how long? Like 90 minutes?
I don't know. You were on the table for like 3 hours.
So like everything's done for the C-section, but now we're just waiting for this guy. And then when he finally gets there, they assess the situation, they stitch up my bowels, and then they finally start closing me up. And one of the most like concerning, it's not concerning, but it's like weird, is you hear them accounting for all of the items that they've used during the procedure to ensure that they're not closing anything up inside me. And to be honest, hearing them do that multiple times, because they did it once before the surgeon came, and then they did it again when the surgeon came. After the surgeon came, because he used different tools to do the stitching, I guess. And sometimes I just feel like there might be something in me because I heard them say it so many times, but I doubt there's anything in me. It's like in my head now because like I couldn't get their voices out of my head. One of the sweet moments was I had told Joe, like, I was like, I hate it here. And then I also was like, did I say I wanted out? Like, what did I say to you?
Yeah. Well, you were about to black out.
I was
exhaustion until you met him, and then that boosted you back to life.
I was having a hard time like keeping my eyes open, and I was about to have like a blackout because I couldn't fucking sustain this level of everything any longer. Just having my muscles all convulsing like this the entire time too was like physically exhausting on top of the mental exhaustion of the whole ordeal. And I basically just like looked at Joe and was like, I hate it here. I'm out. Like, that's something that I say regularly when I'm about to faint, like, I'm out. And he held the baby in his arms and put him down on my face, and we touched cheek to cheek. And I remember feeling how warm he felt. And even though I couldn't physically open my eyes because I was so up at that point, I was able to like kind of smile and kind of relax a little bit just because it was so nice to feel his little face on my face. And he wasn't crying. He cried originally when he came out because like they make him cry or whatever, but he was being so good. And Joe was humming When the Saints Come Marching In. Was that the only song you could think of?
Yeah, I don't know why.
You don't know why?
Never hummed that song in my life.
I was gonna say it was a really out of character choice for you, babe. And yeah, so then they stitched me up. The other thing was, while they were stitching me up, the two lady doctors were like having the weirdest, most benign conversation. Like, they're not even a foot away from my head, right? Like, they're pretty close, and they're like, yeah, I'm thinking about settling down, like just coworker talk.
It was weird.
It was super weird. There was no, it's like when the sheet went up to protect me from seeing the shit, it like made them think that there was some sound barrier, but it's like, no, we can hear everything you're doing. And I'm still shaking at this point, and they go, here's your baby, and I'm like, how am I supposed to hold my baby? Like, I can't control my arms, bro. And so they put the baby at the foot of my bed, and they rolled us into the recovery room. And in the recovery room, I finally held the baby for the first time. And I was really nervous about it because I know that sometimes like people who have C-sections have a hard time bonding with their baby. And I really wanted to do skin on skin with him right away. And I know that there's some times where you get the epidural and that makes it harder for the baby to latch because they have the epidural in their system too, and blah, 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 blah. But I feel very blessed because the first thing he did was latch onto my breast, and he has not left it since. And
then you crushed 3 spindrifts in 1 minute.
I was so thirsty. Joe had some drinks down there, and I was like, I was so thirsty. They have you on an IV, like with fluids and shit, but my mouth was the driest it's ever been. I would say between the shaking and the disassociating, my third greatest task during that C-section was just trying to like keep my mouth a little bit damp. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was dying of some dry ass mouth shit. So crushed 3 spindrifts, had some coconut water, had some ginger ale, and then just chilled in the recovery cot for ever. And then
the comfort of conditions went down severely when we moved to postpartum.
Yeah, then they move us from honestly the delivery room was kind of lit, and then the OR sucked, and then the recovery room sucked. And it's not even a room, it's just a bed surrounded by a curtain. And you have to move all your shit out of the delivery room immediately. So if we hadn't had a doula, Joe would have had to pack up our entire delivery room while I was in the OR.
Well, it's a carload of stuff.
So while I was in the OR, had we not had a doula, Joe would have had to not be by my side clearing out the room for the next person who's going into that room while I'm in a C-section.
They're literally like, take it or lose it.
Oh my God. So then we go to our doula very sweetly takes our placenta off to get turned into capsules, which I see some of you are saying don't do it. It's like, it's already been done, girl. Like, save your breath, save your keystrokes. And they move us into the postpartum bedroom and immediately are like, it's at this point, it's like,
we get in there at 5. They're like, get some rest. And they come back at 6 trying to talk about the birth certificate.
Yeah, we get into the room at like 5 a.m. and immediately at 6 a.m. they're in there like, fill out this birth certificate. Give us your blood. We're taking the baby's blood. We're taking your vitals. And then from that point on, like every hour they were in taking our vital signs. And the next like 3 hours later, around like 8 a.m., they come in and apparently I have an infection from the cut on my bowels, probably because they would not give me the antibiotics before they cut me open in the OR. And then I'm in the hospital for an additional 3 days on an IV drip of antibiotics because of the infection that I got. That's not the typical infection that comes with C-sections. It's what was specifically a result of the emergency C-section that resulted in a laceration on my bowels where they did not give me the antibiotics before the procedure. And so I was stuck there for a few more days. And it sucked ass.
Couldn't wait to get out of there.
Couldn't wait to get out of there. But I have never been so happy as when I was looking at my little baby and getting to breastfeed him and having him snuggled up in bed with us and watching Joe try to figure out how to perfectly swaddle him. I can't swaddle for shit, but Joe watched the nurses do it a few times, so for a while Joe was our swaddle hero. What are some of the good things? There were some funny moments. Early on, the doctor was like, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't say how this is going to go. And I said, well, I'd like to see the doctor with a crystal ball. And then when they kicked Joe out of the room to do my epidural, he found a crystal ball.
Sitting right on their front desk.
There's literally a crystal ball sitting right on the front desk.
Lying bitch.
They lied about everything. And then after one of the emergency scenarios, Joe just goes, I have a question. And she goes, okay, what? And he shows her a picture of the crystal ball. He goes, what the is this? She goes, what?
She just laughed.
She just laughed. But that was a highlight for me. I rewrote some of the emergency situation when they were dragging me into the C-section so that I would have a funnier version in my mind. Do you want to hear my version? So I haven't been able to shave my pubic hair forever. And so it's a little crazy down there. I'm sure I couldn't see it at the time because of my tummy. But my rewrite of the emergency scenario is when they pull out the trimmers to shave my pubic hair. I say to the woman, can you just shave the whole thing? And she goes, there's not enough time. And I say, oh, it's that bad? And she goes, yeah. And then they'd wheel me back to that didn't happen, but that's in my mind. That's what I rewrote for myself. I wish I did more rewriting for myself where I was a little bit more positive, but I can't tell if that's toxic or not. Do you have any others? Oh, there was a earthquake. A huge earthquake the morning of his birthday that stressed me out beyond. I just started crying. Joe's sleeping on the floor, snoring his mind away.
I was awake for that.
Girl, you were out cold.
I was awake for it. I felt it. What are you talking about?
I had to scream, Joe, Joe. You were snoring.
But I felt it.
Okay, fine.
I got up and I was like, whatever. We've been having lots of earthquakes lately.
You're so annoying. The amount of times this man says, I was up and is violently snoring is too damn many.
The tyranny of the father.
So what's one good memory you have?
My favorite memory is just watching you pop out of your blackout when you saw him for the first time.
He was really cute.
Your eyes just popped up and you were back.
And do you want to add anything?
Honestly, no, it was so bad I can't remember right now most of it.
Yeah, it was pretty freaking awful, I have to say. Like, I always want to try and look on the bright side and, like, cling to the positive, and, like, the positive is that he's here. And my whole birth plan, like, I knew that there was always the chance that, like, you make a plan and God laughs or whatever. But for me, it was, like, the hardest part of it was saying early on, instead of doing all of this, let's just schedule the C-section, and having them say to me, no, you're wrong. And then to be right after all of that is pretty frustrating. And I'm a person who loves to say I told you so to a psychotic degree. And I still didn't love getting to say, I told you so. The aftermath of it all for me has been a lot of work. Like, I felt, I don't know if this is from the epidural or if this is normal, but after we got home, like, I don't really remember the first week home. I have, like, little memories of things that happened here and there, but, like, I was in a real fog. And then after the fog kind of broke, I was very, very sad, like, sobbing uncontrollably. It was like norovirus sadness, like just explosive tears, where if I didn't let the tears out, you could hear them, like, in the back of my throat, like going. Not only that, but because of everything that we did before the C-section, I still have, like, heavy bleeding and a C-section scar that's healing. And no one really tells you about that healing process, but, like, the nerves are damaged in my stomach, so most of my stomach's, like, pretty numb, or feels like it's, like, asleep and kind of tingly, and it's weird to touch, and my scar is really tight, and it's almost like a rope tied around my waist, and my stomach, as it's deflating, just sort of hangs over it, which is pretty painful. And I don't know when that will heal or feel better. Like, it's been a slow progression. But all that to say is I've been listening to a lot of really positive manifestation or positive affirmation tapes and hypnobirthing tapes about, like, feeling more positive about my C-section birth, because to some degree it feels like I was robbed of the end of my pregnancy, because it was such a, to have to, like, disassociate through something that's that awful, like, means that you're not present in that moment, which means that you're not really absorbing that moment. And that's a really hard thing to not get to absorb, because it's like, to not feel the period at the end of that sentence is really confusing for your, like, for me mentally. It's like, there's no period and the baby's here. And so I've just been trying really hard to, like, change my perspective on that, and to celebrate that he's here. And because I was always celebrating that he was here, but it's like, it's really hard to enjoy the nice moments when you're choking on sadness that you can't control. My doula did suggest that I take omega-3 and B2 to help with the baby blues, and that really, really helped, we're almost 4 weeks out now from the surgery and the birth, and I'm feeling much better. But it's definitely something that's gonna take like a daily, I don't know, like routine to not fall into a, gosh, what am I trying to say? My friend's therapist one time said to him, what good does it do carrying your trauma baggage? Like, do you earn something more? Like, is there a merit system for you carrying this woe is me baggage? Or can you accept that this thing happened to you and let the baggage go and move on without it? So that's something I'm trying to do, to like let it go, to accept that this is my story, to be proud of the strength that I showed in this situation, like in the eye of the storm, that I weathered it, that I came out the other end, grateful with every fiber of my being that my baby is okay, that there is nothing wrong with his heart, that his heart is good and strong, which is something I told myself my entire pregnancy, that his hair is good and strong, that he looks just like his dad and has my eyes, that he's the sweetest latcher, and that he sleeps if he's well fed, and that he's pretty great, all things considered, and that these are what I've been told some of the hardest nights of parenting in your life, and yet I feel like it hasn't been that bad yet, like knock on wood. So my story is not what I anticipated it being, and it's not what I wanted it to be, but it is my story, and I'm accepting it, and I'm so grateful to be this boy's mama, and I'm so grateful to share this story with you. When a lot of you found out that I had a C-section, I got a lot of messages in my DMs about other women who have had, you know, even more awful stories than what I went through. And a friend of mine said that the more that we talk about our birth stories and how hectic they are and all of those things, the more real it becomes for us, because as the women going through them, like it's such a heightened situation that it almost doesn't seem real to us and we can black it out, but owning our stories can be very healing. So I encourage all of you to share your stories and own your stories, and I would love to hear them, and I am super grateful to every mom that's reached out to me about her experience and who held me, you know, either in real life or virtually during the baby blues, and who offered me guidance and support and care. And, you know, just from the bottom of my heart, like, thank you all so much for being here. It's pretty wild, and I'm really, really grateful for all of it and for you. So hopefully next Tuesday the vlog's a little less sad and it's a little more fun. I kind of want to talk about what it's been like this first month of having my little Squee. I call him Squee, like Mr. Smee from Peter Pan, but Squee because I was not doing great. Couldn't remember his name was Smee. Anyway, we'll see you next Tuesday.